Vault Veritas. SCP Files. Episode 105 Pilgrimage. Incident Report 8124-2. Second known incident report involving SCP-8124, colloquially known as the Boots. Object class: safe. Risk assessment level: low. Reported by D44783, also known as Reed Simmons. Report made February 20th, 2022. I never really minded being at the Foundation. Not all that much, anyway. I mean, after what I did, it felt deserved. And if we're honest, they really aren't lying about the anomalies. All that talk about protecting the public isn't just propaganda. If the average person out there knew even half of what these people have locked away underground, there'd be riots by the end of the week. That wasn't why I ran. I wanted to talk to my husband. That's all. The Foundation doesn't let us contact anyone on the outside, you see. No letters, no phone calls, nothing. And right before I ended up here, he'd been diagnosed with cancer. I never got to find out how bad it was. Even if I deserved to be here, he didn't deserve to be left wondering where I'd gone. And I couldn't stand not knowing whether he was even still alive, whether he was getting treatment, whether he'd beaten it, whether he'd still thought about me at all. So I ran. Well, okay, that makes it sound random. Truth be told, I'd been planning to run for months. There's no point lying about it anymore. The D-Class gossip. More than you'd think, actually. You spend enough time down here and people start swapping rumors like trading cards. It's everything you can think of. Who got pulled for testing? What strange things somebody saw getting wheeled down a corridor? Which researchers are getting a little too risky? You hear all sorts. And of course, you hear a lot about the anomalies themselves. That's how I learned about the Boots. Apparently, there was an SCP in low-security storage that could take you somewhere else. Nobody knew where. Nobody seemed to agree on how it even worked. But everyone who'd heard about it repeated the same thing. If you put them on, don't take them off, or you just end up back where you started. So I began preparing, sneaking things, you know. A few days' worth of rations from the cafeteria. A flashlight, spare batteries, a little first aid kit I'd managed to pinch from a maintenance locker, anything small enough to hide under my shirt on the walk back to my cell. Then, on the day I finally made my move, I lifted the final thing: a researcher's security badge. Getting to the Boots turned out to be the easiest part. To this day, I still don't understand why something that valuable was sitting in a low-security storage locker. Figuring out how to use them, however, took a little trial and error. They expanded to fit my feet the moment I began sliding them on. and after some walking around and darting my eyes about like I was about to get caught all over again, I closed my eyes and thought about home. One more step, and I was gone. The next thing I knew, I was standing in a beautiful pine forest. The sun had only just begun its climb into the morning sky, and soft orange light spilled through the branches and onto the forest floor. Birds called to one another somewhere overhead, and every breath tasted clean and fresh and free. I started walking. There wasn't much to suggest one direction over another, but with SCP-8124 on my feet, I figured that whichever way I went would eventually lead me home. I even whistled as I walked. Old tunes, little melodies my husband used to hum while he cooked dinner. The forest never stood still. Wind bent the canopy in soft creaks. Squirrels chased one another from branch to branch. The carpet of loose nettles on the ground bustled with activity as insects marched to and fro. And every so often, another flock of birds would burst skyward as though startled by something far off in the trees. Hours passed. My feet never hurt. The boots fit so perfectly that blisters weren't even on my radar. I stopped a few minutes to eat a ration and sip from my water bottle, but otherwise I kept walking. It was peaceful. When evening came, I decided to stop before darkness truly fell. I found a small clearing and used one of the spare jumpsuits I'd packed as a makeshift bedroll. I had just closed my eyes when I heard it. A whistle. Not a tune, not even a melody. Just a single high note. I sat bolt upright and scanned the trees. The whistling stopped. I saw nothing. After a few minutes, I managed to convince myself that it had simply been some strange woodland bird, something I'd just never heard of before. I lay back down and managed to sleep. Twice that night, the whistle woke me, and each time it was closer. I never saw what made it, but by morning I no longer had the comforting illusion that I was alone. I kept walking. Every few hours I'd hear it again, that same shrill whistle, always a little louder and always a little closer. I tried changing direction twice. It didn't matter. Wherever I went, the whistle followed. By the second night, it sounded close enough that it prickled the hairs on the back of my neck. I couldn't sleep. Every time I drifted off, the whistle would wake me. Sometimes it sounded like it was only a few trees away. Other times I'd swear I could hear something large forcing its way through the undergrowth behind me. Branches snapped. Birds burst from the canopy overhead. But whenever I turned, nothing. After a while, I stopped looking. I lost count of the days somewhere around the 4th or 5th sunrise. Then, one afternoon, I saw smoke. It was just a thin gray ribbon rising above the trees. I nearly cried with relief. The campsite was small, little more than a stone-ringed fire and a lean-to built from fallen branches. Sitting beside it was an old man. His beard hung halfway down his chest, and his face was weathered and weary. He was barefoot, his feet blackened with dirt and toughened by scar tissue. When he saw the boots, he smiled. "You heard it," he said. "The Whistler." I nodded. He scooted over and offered me a place beside the fire. I don't remember much of what we talked about, though I remember feeling that none of his answers quite fit the questions I asked. He said he'd been walking for years, that he didn't know where we were or where he was trying to go. And when I asked about the whistling, his expression changed. He looked afraid. He told me I shouldn't listen to it, that it wanted me tired and afraid, that he'd never seen it, and that if I got too tired, I could always simply take off the boots. I remember refusing, insisting that I needed these. I had to wear them. I had no other choice now. We must have fallen asleep eventually, and when I woke the next morning, the old man was gone. There were no footprints, no sign of the lean-to, no fire pit. And for the first time in nearly a week, there was no whistle. For a while, I walked in peace again. The whistling never returned. That first evening, I found a cabin tucked between the pines. Smoke curled from its chimney, and through the open window I could see a fire crackling in the hearth. A pot of soup simmered over it, filling the little room with the smell of herbs and vegetables. There was no one inside. I called out, wondering if the traveler had come here himself, if this place belonged to him. Nothing. Still, I must have just missed whoever lived here. A bed of furs lay neatly made in the corner. A coat hung by the door. The soup hadn't burned. I waited. Nobody came. Eventually, hunger got the better of me. I helped myself to a huge, steaming bowl, and it was wonderful. Simple, warm, and comforting. As the heat settled into my bones, I caught myself staring down at the boots. Maybe I'd walked far enough. Maybe this was the end. I could stay here for a night or two, rest, and let my feet breathe. My fingers brushed the laces, and then I remembered. I can't take the boots off. It came to me so suddenly that it felt like waking from a dream. I set the bowl down, walked out of the cabin, and never looked back. The tricks grew cleverer after that. Some days I'd hear my mother's voice calling my name. Other days it was my husband, telling me he'd found me at last, that it was time to untie the shoes and be with him again. Once, I even heard a Foundation guard shouting that I'd been caught. It was time to give up. Every voice wanted the same thing, for me to take off the boots. I stopped answering them. I just lowered my head and kept walking. The forest showed me beautiful things, enticing me with hints of peace. Crystal clear ponds where lilies floated untouched, sunlit meadows full of wildflowers. And once, an entire town. People smiled and waved as though they'd been expecting me and were eager for me to join them. Someone called out that supper was almost ready. I just needed to come in and make myself at home. For a moment, I was ready to join them. It had been so long since I'd spoken to someone. Then I noticed something. Not one of them cast a shadow. I kept walking. The tricks turned violent. Whatever had been trying to coax me into stopping seemed to realize that temptation wasn't going to work. If it couldn't convince me to take the boots off, perhaps it could make it unbearable to keep them on. The day after I left the village, I tripped. Over what, I couldn't tell you. One moment I was walking along a gentle stretch of forest floor. The next, I pitched forward with enough force to send pain lancing through my ankle. I cried out and tried to stand. The ankle folded beneath me. I sat there for a long while, staring at it as it blackened and swelled. I had 1 day's worth of food and water left. There were no rivers nearby, no sign that the journey was nearly over. For the first time since putting on the boots, I wondered if I might simply die here. So I made camp, and when morning came, my ankle was perfectly fine. It was not sore, not stiff, and the dark bruising had simply vanished. I thanked whatever strange luck had smiled on me, and continued on. But I didn't make it a mile. While stepping over a fallen log, something sharp buried itself in my palm. I jerked back with a gasp, blood streaming between my fingers. I wrapped the wounded hand in my coat and kept walking. I couldn't afford to stop now. The next morning, the cut was also gone. Not healing, gone, as though the skin had never been opened at all. Then the food ran out. The days passed. 1, then 2, then 3. The hunger gnawed at my stomach. Thirst clawed at the back of my throat. But I never weakened. I never stumbled, and I never felt my body begin to fail. Eventually, I fell. I still don't know how. There hadn't been a cliff, I'm certain of that. The forest hadn't opened before me. I don't remember the ground crumbling beneath my feet. One moment I was walking, and the next, there was simply nothing beneath me. I remember every second of the fall, and I remember the impact. The sound of sharp cracking, and the feeling of bones shattering. I lay at the bottom of that ravine for hours into the night. I couldn't move. Every breath was agony. My twisted limbs lay broken and splayed, and I could feel my blood draining away, but seemingly never running out. I couldn't call for help, so I just lay there beneath the stars, waiting to die. Morning came. I opened my eyes. Every bone had mended. Every bruise had vanished. There wasn't even a scratch. I climbed out of the ravine, and I kept walking. Of course, I finally understood it all. It wasn't the forest, nor was it the journey. I'd thought Perhaps it was a grand quest I'd been meant to overcome. But no, it was the boots. They meant to wear me down. They meant to make me stop. To make me decide the journey wasn't worth finishing. Whatever bargain these boots had struck with the Foundation, they wanted to go back, and I was the only thing keeping them from it. I started talking to the boots, begging them, pleading with them just to let me go home. They never answered, but they did stop trying to hurt me. Instead, they gave me dreams. Every night, I'd close my eyes and find myself back beneath fluorescent lights. I dreamed of plastic meal trays sliding across cafeteria counters, of overhead announcements crackling through old speakers, of the smell of bleach and industrial cleaners drifting through spotless corridors. I dreamed of my cell. Funny, isn't it? I used to stare at that little concrete room and imagine returning home to my husband. Now, I dreamed of going back, of sleeping on a real mattress, of eating until I was full. I don't think anyone could blame me for taking the boots off. I wanted it to be over. The moment I untied those laces, I was standing back in a Foundation hallway. The guards nearly shot me. One raised his rifle and demanded to know where I'd been. Honestly, I think I would have hugged him if he'd let me. Instead, I collapsed onto the concrete floor and laughed. Then I asked if I could please have something to eat. They kept me there until a researcher arrived. His badge read, Head Researcher Dr. Garcia. He barely spared me a glance. Instead, he walked straight past me, knelt beside the boots, and gently brushed a hand across the worn leather. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear him, he greeted it with a soft, welcome home. I've spent the last several days back in my cell. They told me to write down everything while they decided my next assignment. Termination, maybe. Though, I doubt it. Dr. Garcia dismissed me almost instantly. He seemed rather indifferent about the whole thing, as though this outcome of the boots returning had always been expected. I've even overheard through my cell door talk of another expedition. I escaped. I truly escaped. I crossed an impossible world. I survived hunger, injury, even death itself, if that's what falling from the cliff had meant. And in the end, I know nothing more. I did not get to see my husband, to find out what happened. I came right back to where I started. And I still wonder if perhaps that wasn't the best outcome after all. It wasn't the best outcome. It truly, truly wasn't.
Vault Veritas SCP Files is a podcast inspired by the SCP Foundation. Pilgrimage is based on SCP-8124 by Fire Knight from the SCP Wiki located at scpwiki.com/SCP-8124. It is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 3.0 unported license. This episode featured Justin Kellner as Scott Anderson. It was written and edited by Leola Angel. We welcome comments. Please rate and review us, email us at vaultveritas@gmail.com, or join our Discord channel using the link in the episode description. Thanks for listening.